You've probably heard stories about kids remembering past lives and dismissed them as fantasy. But what if I told you major universities are now studying these cases, and some of the evidence is starting to hold up? This isn't coming from spiritual forums or Reddit threads, it's coming from Harvard-trained psychiatrists and peer-reviewed journals. In this video, I'll show you the scientific research that's forcing even skeptics to pay attention to reincarnation again, so you can explore this idea without checking your logic at the door and maybe leave with a worldview that finally makes sense. Most people treat reincarnation like a religious idea or mystical belief. But what happens when you shift the lens from spirituality to physics? Could reincarnation be more about energy and information than souls and karma? Here's what modern science is starting to reveal. First, there's growing evidence that the brain doesn't produce consciousness. Instead, it may act as an interface, translating awareness into human perception. This theory isn't fringe. It's been explored by neuroscientists and philosophers alike. If awareness operates through the brain rather than from it, then death may not terminate it. Modern research is beginning to challenge the long-held assumption that mind and brain are the same thing. In documented cases, individuals with extensive brain damage have retained awareness and memory far beyond what should be biologically possible. Studies of near-death experiences show people describing details of their surroundings while brain activity is virtually flatlined. These phenomena suggest that consciousness might not emerge from neurons, but instead interface through them as if the brain is a translator, not a generator. Think of your brain as a kind of lens, focusing an already existing field of awareness into a coherent human experience. When the lens cracks, the light doesn't vanish. It simply stops being shaped into a single form. Now think about energy. Physics shows that nothing in nature truly disappears. It only shifts its form. So if consciousness is a patterned expression of energy and information, what happens to that pattern when your body dies? Does it dissolve into nothing, or does it continue in another state of organization? Fields may hold the answer. In quantum physics and systems theory, fields are not empty space. They are the invisible frameworks that structure reality. They carry information about how particles behave, how forms sustain themselves, and how order emerges from chaos. Every atom, every organism, every thought exists within an informational that guides and preserves pattern. If the universe remembers form through fields, could it also remember you? Could identity itself be a recurring pattern that reemerges when conditions align, not as a ghost or migrating soul, but as information reorganizing into new life? Reincarnation, then, might not be about souls jumping from body to body. It might be about information, your information, persisting and reforming under the right conditions. Even if you accept that energy doesn't die, the big question becomes, so where does it go? And more importantly, can it hold on to the patterns that made you, you? Physics reminds us that energy doesn't vanish. It transitions between states. So when you die, the energy that animated your life doesn't disappear. It changes state just as water becomes vapor, or light bends into color through a prism. The form shifts, but the essence remains. Now add in something more radical. The idea that the universe itself is structured as a kind of vast informational web, an interconnected matrix where every particle, every wave, and every event leaves an imprint. In quantum physics, this is sometimes described as the zero-point field, an ocean of energy that exists even in what we think of as empty space. Others call it the quantum vacuum or the morphic field, a term used to describe how nature seems to remember patterns and forms. This isn't poetic language. It's a growing area of research across physics, neuroscience, and systems theory. Experiments in quantum coherence show that particles separated by vast distances can share information instantly, suggesting that information is not bound by space or time. In other words, the universe behaves less like a collection of isolated objects and more like a single unified information network. If that's true, then your consciousness, your thoughts, memories, emotions, and behaviors may not vanish with the body. The brain accesses, not stores, these field patterns and translates them into experience. So rather than thinking of yourself as a single light bulb producing light, imagine you're connected to a power grid, one current but many forms. When one bulb goes out, the current continues to flow, ready to illuminate again wherever the circuit reconnects. If so, what we call you, your tendencies, fears, instincts, even your recurring dreams could be retained as an energetic blueprint. Not in a mystical sense, but in a physical, data-based way. These patterns of consciousness might lie dormant in the fabric of space until the right conditions, a compatible mind, or a resonant life draws them back into form. This all sounds theoretical until you realize there's real-world data that supports it. What happens when young children recall names, details, and lives they couldn't possibly know? In the 1960s, psychiatrist Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia began documenting hundreds of these cases. Over the next 4 decades, he and his research team collected more than 2,500 verified reports from children around the world who spontaneously described previous lives, often with extraordinary accuracy. Take one example, a 4-year-old boy in rural India who vividly remembered being a shopkeeper murdered by an axe blow to the head. He identified the village where it happened, described the man who attacked him, and even pointed to the spot where the weapon was hidden. Investigators confirmed every detail: the village, the crime, and the location of the weapon. Another case came from Lebanon, where a young girl recalled a previous family name, hometown, and even dialect words unique to a distant region. When researchers visited the place she described, a family matching her memories existed, and the details she gave about their deceased daughter's habits were exact. Many of these children also displayed birthmarks or physical traits corresponding to fatal wounds or distinctive marks from the lives they described. Stevenson carefully photographed and cataloged them, noting correlations so precise they couldn't be explained by coincidence. After Stevenson's death, Dr. Jim Tucker, a child psychiatrist and his successor at UVA's Division of Perceptual Studies, continued the work using modern methods, statistical analysis, psychological evaluation, and controls to rule out suggestion or cultural influence. In one of Tucker's well-known cases, an American boy named James Leininger began speaking of being a World War II fighter pilot. He knew names of aircraft, ships, and crew members later verified in historical records. His memories included crash details that matched military logs exactly. Across cultures, from India to Alaska to Europe, the patterns remain consistent. Children begin speaking about another life between ages 2 and 6. They describe family names, specific locations, and causes of death that can often be verified. And almost always the memories fade with age, as if the developing brain and growing ego gradually tune out the connection. Parallel research adds further weight. Studies of near-death experiences by cardiologist Dr. Pim van Lommel and others document patients describing events in operating rooms while their brains showed no measurable activity, suggesting consciousness may function independently of the body. Together, these findings hint that awareness and the information that defines identity may continue functioning even without biological support. These aren't fringe anecdotes or viral stories. They're published in peer-reviewed medical and psychological journals, archived at major universities, and examined by scholars who approach the subject with rigorous skepticism. If memory isn't stored in the brain, but accessed through it, could reincarnation be about reconnecting with that data, not transporting it? Instead of memory being files inside your head, imagine it like a streaming service. The brain doesn't store the movie, rather it streams it from the cloud. What we call remembering may simply be the act of retuning into a wide information network that already exists. The brain may act less like a storage unit and more like a tuner translating frequencies into experience. The music isn't inside the radio, it's in the field. Your device just pulls it in. Physics gives us a clue through the principle of non-locality, the discovery that once two particles interact, they remain connected no matter how far apart they move. When one changes, the other responds instantly, faster than light could travel between them. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but today it's one of the most tested realities in quantum science. Non-locality tells us that information can exist beyond physical boundaries and that the fabric of the universe is inherently connected. In that sense, your consciousness may not be confined to your skull. It could be part of a larger informational web where patterns and experiences remain accessible across space and time. Biologist Rupert Sheldrake extended this idea into the living world with his theory of morphic resonance. He proposed that nature itself has memory and that every species, every behavior, even every idea, draws on a collective informational field built by all who have come before. When enough individuals repeat a pattern, it becomes easier for others to replicate it, as if the habit of the universe strengthens through use. In this view, your personal memories could operate the same way. Each thought, emotion, or experience you have leaves a subtle imprint in the fabric of reality, a pattern that others, or even a future version of you, might later access. Memory, then, isn't stored in neurons like books on a shelf. It's stored in resonance, the way a tuning fork vibrates in sympathy with another of the same note. That's not reincarnation as transport, it's reincarnation as re-access, a continuity of information, not of flesh. But why would only some children recall past lives? And why does it fade with age? Young brains are more plastic. That means they're more flexible, more open to subtle patterns most adults filter out. They haven't fully developed the ego identity that says, "This is who I am." That lack of fixed self might allow deeper resonance with the field. There's also the role of trauma. Many of the children studied by Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker had memories linked to violent or sudden deaths. And often they had physical signs, birthmarks or phobias that correlated with the past life events. Some researchers believe early childhood trauma may thin the veil between lifetimes, allowing fragments of non-local memory to surface before they fade beneath the weight of a solidified identity. Some of the world's most respected theories already support information persistence. So why aren't we applying these ideas to the self? We accept that atoms don't disappear when a body dies, but we assume memory does. Why? Physics shows that nothing in nature truly disappears. Not matter, not energy, and, as modern quantum research suggests, not information. Even the black hole paradox now points to preservation. Data isn't lost, but encoded in new form. If the universe safeguards information at every level, why would consciousness be the one exception? The holographic principle builds on that idea. It proposes that everything in the universe, including time and space themselves, might be encoded on a vast informational boundary. Reality, then, isn't a solid 3D stage, but a projection from a deeper data fabric. In that model, memory doesn't have to live inside the brain at all. It could exist everywhere, woven into the fabric of space-time itself. And then comes a theory that turns the entire picture inside out: biocentrism. Developed by stem cell researcher and physician Dr. Robert Lanza, biocentrism argues that consciousness is not an emergent property of the physical world, but rather it's the precondition for it. In other words, the universe doesn't create life. Life creates the universe. Lanza's premise begins with an uncomfortable observation. Every measurement in physics depends on an observer. Time, space, and even matter behave differently when observed. In quantum experiments, a particle exists in multiple states until consciousness interacts with it. Biocentrism takes this seriously, suggesting that reality doesn't exist independently of awareness. It forms through it. From this view, consciousness is the projector, and the physical universe is the projection. Your body and brain are part of that projection, but your awareness is the field observing it all. When the projection ends, the field doesn't die. It simply shifts perspective. In the same way that light doesn't disappear when a screen turns off, consciousness doesn't vanish when the body ceases to function. It continues, possibly reorganizing itself in new forms of observation, what spiritual traditions have long described as reincarnation. These ideas aren't fringe. So maybe the problem isn't the science, it's the assumption that identity is just neurons and chemistry, when the evidence increasingly suggests that awareness itself might be the foundation of everything that exists. Even with all this evidence and theory, the core question remains: what exactly is consciousness, and can it echo through time? We can measure brain activity, but we still can't explain the experience of red or what it feels like to love, to fear, or to dream. These are not neural signals, they are inner realities. So what happens to that inner experience when the brain goes quiet? Science can describe patterns of activity like this area lights up when you feel joy, another when you recall a memory. But the experience itself, the awareness behind those processes, remains a mystery. It's what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, how matter gives rise to mind. Studies in neural oscillation show that thoughts and emotions are accompanied by rhythmic electrical waves that synchronize across different regions of the brain. These oscillations generate an electromagnetic field that some scientists, such as John Joe McFadden and Susan Pocket, suggest could be the true substrate of awareness itself. Others, like physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, have theorized that microscopic structures within neurons, called microtubules, may sustain quantum vibrations that interface directly with the underlying fabric of reality. In this view, consciousness is not trapped inside the brain, but expressed through it as a harmonic pattern that can, in principle, exist beyond the limits of the body. So instead of imagining a soul traveling between bodies, imagine a wave returning when the same harmonics reappear in the field, not a transfer of identity, but a reformation of familiar vibration within the larger continuum of consciousness. If consciousness carries a unique frequency, then perhaps existence isn't a sequence of separate lives, but one continuous vibration, shifting instruments, yet playing the same underlying song. So if you've lived before and might live again, what does that mean for the life you're living now? If your energy reforms, would you want to inherit the world you're leaving behind? Every decision you make could ripple far beyond this one lifetime. That fight you avoid, the kindness you choose, the truth you speak. It might not just shape this life, it could shape what you come back to. Legacy isn't about status or reputation, it's about resonance. The quality of what you send into the field of life may echo forward. So maybe growth isn't just self-improvement, it's signal refinement. As more evidence emerges, scientists are facing a crisis. The current models don't work. What do you do when the data breaks the theory? Neuroscience can map brain activity during meditation, but it can't explain who's observing that data. The materialist model says consciousness arises from brain matter. But then, how do you explain near-death experiences where people report accurate details from the operating room while brain activity flatlines? This isn't just a philosophical debate anymore. There's data, from past life memories to verifiable perceptions during clinical death. Post-materialist thinkers like Dean Radin, Bernardo Kastrup, and Pim van Lommel are pushing science to expand its framework. Because the question isn't just, is reincarnation possible? It's, what kind of science is big enough to hold the answer? Maybe the truth isn't mystical or mechanical, Maybe it's harmonic. What if reincarnation isn't about a soul traveling through time, but about consciousness replaying a familiar pattern, the way a melody returns when the right conditions strike the same note? If awareness is rhythm rather than matter, then death isn't silence, it's just rest between movements. And when the universe aligns again, the song resumes, not mystical, just resonance finding form. You're not reborn as a copy. You're reassembled as a familiar echo, carrying the essence of who you've been, without being confined by it. Maybe that's what evolution really is, consciousness refining its tone, learning how to play itself with more coherence each time. Every lifetime a verse, every insight a new chord. For thinkers like you, this isn't about believing in past lives. It's about recognizing that awareness, the same force behind every heartbeat, every act of love, every question you've ever asked, might be part of a larger continuity we can now start to understand. Because if energy and information can't be destroyed, then perhaps meaning can't either. And maybe your search for truth, for logic that meets mystery, is simply the field remembering its own song through you.